info, we're moving on to section 18. Topic for section 18 is this very important application construct called caching. And some of you might be familiar with what this means, but maybe not. In short, what caching is a way to improve application performance by taking certain things that the application does and storing those components in active memory so that you don't have to go back to the application to retrieve it. And when you think about a web application having to go back out to a server maybe to pull back a piece of information, that becomes even more relevant. The concept is not new. I mean, we do it a lot in web applications, and the whole .NET framework, though, even when you're writing a standard Windows application, uses caching to improve performance. It's just a common application development technique. So this is something that is kind of intrinsic, really, to the whole environment, and in many cases happens pretty automatically. The why ultimately is it just makes things work faster, and a faster application makes for happy users, and it keeps them coming back. All right, so the author is going to make a little point here of taking a look at something we did last time, and notice when we did this little piece here, and what file is that in? It looks like it's in the probably in the employee controller file. Let's go ahead and open up that application. So we're not working with the security application anymore. That's why you see it closed on my screen. We're going back to the MVC simple app, the one that does all the employee stuff with the databases. And we're going to be going to our employee controller file. And I'm looking for that output cache, and I guess it's not in this file. So maybe I am looking in the wrong spot. Give me just a moment here. Drop it in. I thought that we had added that, but apparently we didn't. So, all right, I don't know why. You know what I'm thinking of is we did this thing, because that number 60 sticks in my head, and this is what we did. I thought that maybe there was a spot where we actually did the caching, but that wasn't actually the case. So we can go back to our employee controller file, and if you compare with the PDF, this is where we are in the code. So what they want us to do at this point is actually add above here output cache duration 60. So back to the code. All right. So that means that whatever we're going to be loading up into the memory is going to persist in the cache, in memory, for 60 seconds. Now, obviously, you can adjust that to whatever you want, and it kind of is one of these things when you are building an application that you have to do a little bit of predictive thought as to how somebody's actually going to use your application. So, for example, if you expect somebody to just like be interacting with your database momentarily to pull back some information, maybe a minute is fine, okay? But maybe they're doing something a little bit more involved where that duration might be bumped up significantly, maybe an hour or a couple hours. So that's something that you have to figure out in terms of the kind of application writing and its usage. Right, and that, of course, is very much subjective to the application. All right. So the thing that the guy wants us to do now is he wants us actually to run the application in debugger mode, and that's actually the mode we've always been running in. But he wants us actually to set a breakpoint, and I think for some of you, maybe this is a new technique, and maybe not. It just depends on who's been teaching you how to code. I'm not a big fan of using breakpoints when I do debugging often until I run into a problem and I need to trace things down. So what this does with a breakpoint, and if you guys have never done this before, you just basically go to your margin here, right where this little section begins. You just click in the margin, and that sets the breakpoint. So you see, what it tells the application to do is run, And as soon as you hit this code, stop here. All right? And we're doing that to actually demonstrate the concept. So I'm going to do a little screen adjusting here, move the PDF back over to screen number 2. And then as the browser window launches when we run this, I want you guys to try to move the window over to the side so that you can watch it like hit the breakpoint when we bring it up, okay? So if you've never done that before, it's kind of fun. So go ahead and hit the launch button. And we're going to go to the employee controller after it launches. Let's move this over. Right. I don't know if you guys remember, we have to actually type in employee. There's nothing wrong. Right? And notice what happened. It popped us right back to the application as soon as I hit that, because when it comes to the employee controller and it tries to run that index, it just tries to load the page, it hits this little piece right here. And then it will indicate to you that you're there. All right. So in terms of where we are in the PDF right now, we're on page 154 at the bottom, and you see that it changed from red to yellow. That means it's stopped right there. Now, in order to continue on running the application, we have to hit the F5 button for it to do that. So you can do that on the keyboard if you want, but there are other techniques for doing it as well. Excuse me. So notice that we have some tools up at the top that allow you to work with these breakpoints. You know, show next, step into, step over, so you can skip code, step back out. But really what we want to do is we want to run F5, which is basically continue. So you can hit the continue button, or you can press F5. So I'm just going to hit the continue button. And then what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and now take us back to the page and hopefully pull up the stuff in the database. Whew. Fortunately, it worked, right? Because I know we had some issues getting this stuff to go here in class. Now, the next set of instructions, and this is on page 155, just below the diagram, it says refresh the browser again within 60 seconds. And you will see that the breakpoint is not hit this time. So watch. And actually, mine did hit this time, didn't it? Okay. Has it been? Was I talking for that long? Okay. Let's run it again, because this is certainly not 60 seconds. And this time it brought it up. Okay. All right. So let's hit it again. Can we? No, we can't, right? But the point is that it shouldn't hit the breakpoint again because it is stored in cache and it's not actually pulling it up from the application. It's stored in memory. Oh, yeah, yeah. And you're looking at the little output? So I'm going to refresh the page, and right there, yeah, and that's what you're talking about, Jason, right? So how many milliseconds? So that's like 50,000 milliseconds, which means 50 seconds. So that means it didn't hit it. That's kind of, I think that's pretty fascinating that you do that. Now, I don't know if you guys play with breakpoints a lot. And I don't consider this necessarily the best example, but the whole point of this, remember, is to try to boost application performance. So it says basically here, it will cache this result for 60 seconds, and when we refresh the browser, it will get the result from the cache, and it won't load the content from the database server. Okay. Now think in terms of like when you're writing an application and the overhead it creates when you are sending data back and forth from a server, especially over an internet connection or a network connection, and the load on the server that it has to like, oh, what do you want? Oh, you want the database again? I got to run the query again. And if you can save that interaction, because you're just pulling back the same stuff, you're not like doing anything fresh, right? It will make it run faster. So that is kind of an important concept, I think. All right, when you move on to the next little section here, bottom of page 155, and I'm going to quote the author. He says, in some cases, you might want different cached versions, such as when you create a detail page, and then you click on the detailed link, you will get details for the selected employee. All right, but first we need to create the detail view for this. So we're going to go ahead and right-click on the details action method from the employee controller and add a view. Of course, you do need to stop your application from running to do this. I don't know if they want us to clear the breakpoint at this point. We'll find out as we go. My intuition is probably, but we'll see. All right, so we're going to go to the detail action method, all right, which is right here. We're going to right-click it and add a view. All right, that's going to bring up this interface here. And then if you scroll down, you actually have to scroll down a couple of, well, actually one whole page before you get your next instruction. And you want to select a template. Of course, you're going to click Details. And you need a model class. And of course, we're going to pick Employees because that's really the only one that we have. And then we need the context, which is only one choice also, honestly. The other stuff can be left alone. And then go ahead and click Add, and then we'll create the view for us, and that's going to drop down into the Views folder, of course. And then it creates a Details CS/HTML page. Right? And what I'm doing right now is I'm taking a look at that and just doing a little comparison with the PDF to see if it's all the same, and it looks all the same to me. It's got the edit and the back to list at the bottom. All right. Now, what we're going to do now is we are going to go back to the controller. So back to the method where we were. And right above the details method, we're going to add the output cache here. So we're putting in the square brackets, and we're going to add output cache, and just let it auto-sense for us. We're going to do duration. And then it's a little trickier here, but basically this is what you're going to type. You're going to type int dot max value, comma, vary by param, and the parameter that we're going to be working with is ID. Right? Because remember, what we're trying to do is pick out a particular employee here to cache. All right. Now, I'm still trying to figure out if they want us to clear the breakpoint. I'm going to clear my breakpoint, you guys. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go ahead and execute the application. I'm going to collapse my output window just a little bit here. Okay, well, it did it for me. Thank you very much. Remember, we do need to go to the employee controller. All right, and one of the reasons that we're here is to actually see that it's pulling it back, and it is pulling it back. It says go ahead and click on the details link of any of the particular employees. So I'm going to click on the top one, which is my name. Oh, and are you guys getting an exception error like me? Okay, so we need to figure that out. So I'm going to pause really quick here and see if we can figure out why that's happening. Let's give it a pause. All right, so I'm trying to figure out the SQL exception and just kind of poking around and looking at stuff. and now I'm realizing what's going on. So I'm going to pull a PDF back over, and then let's do a little bit of comparison. First thing I looked at is, did I type the output cache stuff in correctly, which I certainly did, right? But then if you look at the PDF here, notice that the action result details, int ID, that's all good. But what about the stuff inside? Yeah, we didn't change that, did we? Right. So it's throwing a database exception error because it's trying to pull the stuff back from the database, and it's just not doing it. So the other thing I'm doing also is just kind of scrolling down here to make sure I'm not missing anything lower down, and I'm not. So let's grab this code. In the PDF and replace the view here. Go ahead and save that. Now I'm betting we won't have a problem, right? So when you're making changes, make sure, you guys, that you make all of them. And I'm highlighting that in my PDF so I don't forget it next time. All right, so let's go ahead and try running it now. Let's give it a second to respond, and now we should be able, hopefully, to click on details and pull it back. Is it working for you guys now? Great. I'm glad to hear it. All right. So now the point of this, and he says at the bottom of, or no, in the middle of page 160, right underneath the diagram, says the detail action includes a vary by parameter property with a value of ID. When different values of ID parameter are passed to the controller action, different cached versions of the detailed view are generated. That's kind of bizarre, actually, if you start to think about that. So if I pick a different employee, that one will get cached. So like the ones that I see most often will get stored temporarily while we're running the application. Thinking here, of course, is if that's one you're always going to, let's load it up and cache it in memory so that we don't have to go back to the database and pull it back in. All right, moving on to the next section here. I'll just pull the PDF back over. And it says here you can create a cache profile in the web config file, right? Now, what that does for us are the bullets that it indicates. So what it puts for us all the caching information in one central location, so we can control it, from one spot and not have to jump from file to file to file to make it happen. It also allows us to create one and apply it to many different structures. So it kind of like, think about like how you do like CSS, right? If you use an external CSS file, it can apply to, multiple pages. So it kind of gives you one, not only central control, but able to control many things at once. And then you can also make this change because this is a text file. It doesn't get compiled into executable code. It does not, require recompiling the application. And one thing you guys probably don't think about when we're writing .NET applications, and we think about them as web pages, but remember that .NET code becomes executable code on the server. The server, once it compiles that code, it doesn't recompile it every time you run the application. It compiles once and that application stays. The only time that application is going to change on the server, the executable code, is when you change the code and recompile it again. So that's why when you have a .NET application, you can't just FTP it to the server and it runs. You have to put it on the server and have the server accept it as an application, which means it compiles the code and stores those binaries, because binaries run faster than code that has to be modified on the fly. And then the other thing is you can also do some disabling there if something's already in production mode. All right, so they're showing us a little example here, bottom of 160, top of 161, of how this might happen. So we could take some of the stuff that we've done. So in this case, it says output cache profiles. And then you can see we're adding a name to it. So we're giving it a designation so we can refer to it. We're giving it a duration, 600 seconds, right, 10 minutes. And then we're throwing in that vary by parameter again. In this case, we're setting it to none. But this piece of code has to go inside this part of that config file in order to work. All right. Now, once you have that in that config file, then you can change the code, so you don't have to get really specific on the controller page, and then you just call it up from that file. So they want us to actually make these changes, so let's go ahead and do that. So the file that we need to change is the web config file. Okay, once again, I'm going off to the second screen. Let's stop our application if it's still running. Now, it did tell us that we actually can make this change without changing the code, but we do have to change code in the C# file too, which is compiled. So down to web config, and this has to go in the system.web section. Okay, so here's the bottom of system.web, right? A small section. I'm just going to add a line here. I'm not going to be able to drop this all in at once because it spans pages, but let's get a good part of it in there. Paste in the rest. And just doing a little bit of indenting here. Okay. And then if you want to save yourself a little typing, you can just copy the name that we're giving it. Save this file. Back over to the controller file, employee controller. And then up in the output cache statement, you can change all the stuff in the parens to say cache profile, which I see on my list here, and some double quotes. And now it's pulling it up from web config. Oh yeah, Jason, thank you so much. Yeah, we're not changing this one. So you guys strike that last command. Jason, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I am noticing here on the PDF, folks, that it's right above index, not where I was putting it. Oops. So we're actually changing this one. So we just need to change the stuff in the middle. Should have been smart and copy pasted, right? Not that it's a big deal. Cache profile equals cache 10 minutes. Thank you for catching that. It's those silly things that make it not run, right? Control S to save. Let's go ahead and launch. Let's call up the employee controller. All right. Now, at the bottom of 161, and this is the culmination of this chapter now, and it says if you invoke the index action, like we just did, then within 10 minutes, the same thing will be pulled back from memory for those 10 minutes. All right. If you want to kind of prove it to yourself. You can put those breakpoints in and see it, but at this point, I think we're going to take it on faith that it works. And, remember, for a lot of developers, especially people that do big commercial applications, that do a lot of read writes and get pretty deep into data, application caching is considered an absolute necessity in a lot of those situations. Once again, think about people that might view this on mobile or people that have bad bandwidth. And then think about your servers too. If you can save some read writes on that server, your server will have a longer life because the disk's not hitting. And then of course it'll be snappier for people that actually need to connect to it. All right, folks, that completes section 18. I'm glad we were successful with it, and I will catch you in the next video.